Hey people, it's NIyas713, and this is another Black Heroes video, and this is from Team Rubicon USA, a legacy of survival and selflessness. In order to better appreciate the contributions of Black Americans, Team Rubicon is using Black History Month to learn and share the stories of Black trailblazers in our line of work, emergency management and disaster response. Our final entry in this series is of an unconventional hero whose actions exemplify the spirit of neighbors helping neighbors. Today we recognize Jabbar Gibson, who during Hurricane Katrina took the well-being of the community into his own hands and single-handedly evacuated more than 70 people to safety. 2 days after the levees broke in New Orleans in August 2005, the Houston Astrodome was open to take in the victims of Hurricane Katrina. When the first busload of evacuees from the flooded city arrived, authorities were surprised to see 20-year-old Jabbar Gibson sitting behind the wheel. Gibson was a young black man who lived in the Fisher Projects that formerly stood in the New Orleans Algiers neighborhood. Like most residents of the Fisher, he had not followed the mayor's orders to evacuate the city before Hurricane Katrina made landfall. Many of those that lived there were unwilling to abandon the building they had called home for multiple generations. As well, very few people who lived at the Fisher owned vehicles to evacuate in, even if they had wanted to. Dilapidated before the storm ever arrived, the Fisher sustained serious damage from Hurricane Katrina. Fallen trees had gouged large chunks from housing units, the wind shattered windows, destroyed wooden fences, lifted tiles from the roof, and even ripped pieces out of the building's brickwork. For 2 days, Gibson, along with his friends and family, lived amongst the wreckage without power, food, or the assurance that anybody was coming to help them. Well, word spread that other neighborhoods, the Ninth Ward, Bywater, and Mid-City, were being swallowed by floodwaters. Gibson and a small group of Fisher residents began figuring ways to escape. "We were desperate," said Carrie Levinet, a longtime resident of Fisher. "It was either that or we were going to drown." Gibson and some friends were out to look for help and came across a barn with a dozen abandoned school buses parked inside. They found keys to the buses in the unlocked office, and after an hour got one of the buses to start. Like many residents of the Fisher, Gibson did not own a car and never received his driver's license, much less certification to drive a bus. "I learned right then and there," says Gibson. "I was driving all right for the first time." Now the means for escape, Gibson and his friends returned to the Fisher and began loading people onto the bus. That's when the police arrived. They made everyone get off the bus and demand that Gibson hand over the keys. Nonetheless, Gibson's mother Bernice managed to convince the officers that giving Jabbar the keys and letting him take control of the bus was necessary to evacuate people who were in dire need of help. Seeing the severity of the situation and unable to provide any assistance themselves, the police returned the keys to Jabbar and told him to get out of the city. With some 60 people piled into the bus, Gibson set out on what would be a grueling 13-hour drive. I just want to comment on that, the way the police showed up. It shows you that the police really are not about helping. Even in a almost apocalypse situation, their first instinct is to simply come and mess with black people who desperately need help. It's always their first instinct, worldwide. And yeah, that includes the black countries as well. As they left the flooded city, they witnessed dramatic scenes of floating bodies and whole neighborhoods that had seemingly been left for dead. Even with little space to spare on the bus, Gibson stopped several times along Highway 90 and picked up people stranded by the side of the road. "I just couldn't leave them behind," he said. Many of the passengers were in emotional and mental distress for the previous days. Others were sick or disabled and in need of medical attention. At least a couple were pregnant. When they reached Lake Charles, Gibson and the passengers pooled their money to refuel the bus. An attendant at the gas station gave them 2 full ice chests, 2 cases of water, and 1 piece of invaluable information. He told Gibson that the Astrodome in Houston was being opened as a shelter for Hurricane Katrina evacuees. But before they had just been fleeing New Orleans, Gibson and his passengers now had a destination. The drive from New Orleans to Houston typically takes 5.5 hours. But due to the chaos of the evacuation, Gibson was behind the wheel for roughly 13 hours. All on board breathed a sigh of relief when the bus finally reached the Houston Astrodome at 10:30 p.m. However, they were not yet home free. Officials at the site initially refused them entry because they were not on one of the buses scheduled to arrive. They were not worried about us, says Makivia Horton, a passenger on the bus who was 5 months pregnant at the time. Eventually, after 20 minutes of confusion and outrage, officials announced that Gibson and the others would be allowed into the Astrodome. Soon they would be joined there by roughly 25,000 other evacuees from New Orleans. Gibson, like many survivors of Hurricane Katrina, would struggle personally in the years to come, but to all aboard the bus at that moment on September 5th, 2005, he was a hero. "He saved my whole family's life, and he saved everyone in the Fisher, and the world should know it," says his mother Bernice. Gibson's story illustrates how our country's disaster response and emergency management systems have historically failed communities of color. Not communities of color, black people. The people in the border are getting all sorts of help and they're getting talks of reparations for all their suffering. Black people have not gone anything. Stop with this kind of gaslighting. Yet his story is not one of the helplessness. Instead, Gibson defined his life and legacy by the help he gave to others. While Team Rubicon does not necessarily condone the commandeering of buses, we recognize that disasters call for dramatic out-of-the-box thinking and decisive action. We too refuse to stand by as the floodwaters rise and strive to follow Gibson's example of uncompromising compassion for neighbors in need. And before I end this video, I want to say this. When I searched up Jabbar Gibson and what happened in New Orleans, one of the first things I saw was ex-con or drug dealer helps people. All of these media outlets were determined to slander him and to make him say, well, he's not a good man, he's a drug dealer, or he did something wrong. You know what? That's how the white media goes. They have to destroy the image of the black man. There's no good black man in white supremacy. But we know that Jabbar Gibson had done something great, and he should be honored for that. It doesn't matter what his mistakes were. He doesn't deserve to be humiliated or dragged for the things he's done wrong, but he should be honored for the things that he's done right. Anyway, if you'd like to support this channel, I'll leave my Cash App. If you want to follow me on Instagram, I'll leave that there as well. If you want to buy one of my t-shirts, I'll leave that there as well. And I'll leave this article in the description. Peace.